Welcome, everyone. This is Mara Elaine, and I'm here with my great friend, Bridget Nielsen. Hi, Bridget. How are you?
Hi, so happy to be here with you.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you here. I mean, you like honestly, so I'll just give some context around how I know Bridget and fill you in about a little bit about her as a multidimensional creatrix, because that's what she is essentially. And I'm going to dive into that with her a little bit more. But I essentially met Bridget, I think it was through a lucid dreaming workshop. Maybe that was the first point of contact back in 2014 that you were doing with a couple of others. I think your dad and Aluna possibly at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember having this visceral connection, knowing like, I know this woman, I know this woman. And there was a lot of other components around hybrid children, which is kind of what you were known for back in the day.
Mhm.
And then I ended up actually living with Bridget in Sedona for a period of time in kind of a community house, which which was a massive journey and so beautiful and all the things. So we've been kind of friends ever since and done a few journeys to different land spaces together and have kept in touch over the ethers since then. And so we're actually co-creating together on a retreat in Ireland, which we'll share about in the links below as well. So I'm super excited to dive in with her today and to just really to open this space for what is alive to be spoken to, as always, in this moment. Because I know you've done lots of interviews and you're a podcaster yourself. So it's not to really go back into all of the strands of who you are and what you've been, but there are certain components that I feel are really valuable about your story and what you bring as a being in this world. So I know you as all of these different things as an intuitive artist and multidimensional artist, actually, and creator. So, content creation, retreat facilitator. We've actually done or did a couple of women's workshops back in the day together. And I know that you have accentuated on that with your women's groups. And
Mhm.
really, you're a community builder. I know that you have your Soul Light Collective as well, and really bringing people together and helping them to honor their gifts. And I love that about you. So,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. So, a lot more about Bridget, which I will put down in the notes for people to explore more. But for now, I'm just welcoming you into this space and really just asking you to bring whatever medicine you feel is potent for this conversation, for what we're going to move through, if that's all right with you.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for the
Yeah.
invitation. This is so fun.
It is. It's always fun with you.
Yeah,
We've a lot of elemental support and beings that work with us, I think.
we do,
Yeah,
yeah.
always. So for you, Bridget, let's start at. I mean, I know that you had a big kind of formative process around kind of the alien community and hybrid children back in the day.
Yeah.
And I suppose not to go too deeply into that, because I know that your growth has brought you off in lots of different directions.
Mhm.
But would you like to speak to your, I suppose, your personal arc of spiritual evolution from maybe the last, 12 years, I suppose, going back to 2010, 2009 time, how you've developed and where you are kind of now, I suppose, in
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, wow. This is gonna be fun to say off the cuff of like where what that's like. Um, I think that I mean it started in that fertile time that I think a lot of us in the spiritual world like started pre 2012, which like had this certain like quality to it of just like extra availability of like spirit and
Yeah.
this like kind of resurgence, renaissance, reinvigoration, just like I don't know, like somehow in the ethers, and that was running through a lot of the currents of the world and where I was in Los Angeles, and so I just got introduced to so much, so many different modalities, like so many different possibilities, and once I finally accepted that I'm like intuitive, sensitive, and spiritual, and I'm not normal, then I just like dove headfirst into all of it. And I dove headfirst onto all of it with I think good intentions, definitely good intentions, And at the same time, I was, in my early 20s and in my mid 20s. And like, as I reflect on that now in my mid 30s, I'm like, oh my gosh. So there's like this beauty to like this like innocent curiosity with good intention, exploring spirituality, having experiences. And also a lot of it was interpreted and, um, shared from a 25-year-old's perspective, which is clouded in a
Yeah.
bunch of distortion and lack of
Yeah.
experience in the world, and so like I humbly kind of look at that now, and there's so much I think I even said to you, because on my retreat, like, I don't know, when I was 29 in my first one in Ireland, I like took
Oh,
people to
yes.
Skellig Michael, and I was like, oh my God, that like taking people on this like wild boat journey that's like very tumultuous to a very
Mm.
crazy energetic spot. I mean, I would take people in the open ocean swimming with dolphins. And so there's just certain parts that were like very courageous, and I'm just like
Yeah.
outrageous, which is so incredible. And I have to really like hand it to my maidenhood for just having
Yes.
like that, all of that. While at the same time, I'm like, oh my gosh, there was so much, of me that did want attention and like didn't have, maybe like I had my own distortions and cultural programs that like clouded my pure vessel of how I was interpreting experiences and sharing them in the
Yes.
world. So I've kind of like come on this arc now where I've been humbled a lot, and
Mm.
I'm not motivated in the same ways that I was
Right.
as I enter into womanhood. And so there's like an arc of like spirituality, but it's
Yeah.
very connected to my initiation into different phases of life as well.
Love that. Yeah. Thank you. And that's actually as you speak to that these archetypes of maiden, mother, and crone. How important the honoring and the transitions of moving through those gateways are.
Yeah.
Um, and looking back on your 20 something early Bridget, who was like raring to go and all that energy. And yeah, I mean, she's got you to where you are right now, and all the integration that happens in those middle spaces, really.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I mean, for you then, so moving from that dynamic energy into a new phase of womanhood. I mean, what have been the things that have really supported you on that journey, do you feel?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so fun how like questions are posed. It like opens whole new, portals. Like what supported me on that journey? I think actually getting support. So there's something about, the maiden that kind of is like off by herself, like in the pasture, like picking wildflowers, and that can cause a lot of things, the big bad wolf can come get her, or, like, so there's something
Yeah.
to the like aloneness, I think maybe, of maidenhood is one of the qualities. And so when you said
Mm.
that question, the first thing that came to me of what supported me in this transition and as I enter into womanhood is support, like where I actually, which is an aspect of the feminine that I think is cannot be understated enough, is our ability to receive. And so I think
Yes.
I've shifted a lot, and to where I'm able to receive and thus take in support. And because of
Mm.
that, it's built my capacity to where then I can actually support more other people and help more. So I think the
Right.
biggest thing would be I've received and allowed and support. And also that's a part of the humbling journey where it's like, I don't freaking know it all. Like, and I need help and
Yeah.
assistance, and I'm always a student. And so there's a lot of those pieces of really being together in the togetherness,
Mm.
because it's ironic, because like we were living in community together, like we were in community together, like living
Yes.
together, and we did, share, and there were so many good things, and there was receiving and giving happening there. But I
Yes.
think the real next level of my receptivity has come in, and that's showing up in a very like deeper, different way.
Yeah, of course. Of course. And I think the nature of meeting different challenges in life, and different layers of consciousness, and how things have shifted so fast in the last few years. I mean, I know well, I see you as having had such an external, outward facing presence for a good number of years, and a lot of that being focused on you. I mean, I know I've kind of seen you retreat back in from that. Would you like to speak to a little bit about, like, your relationship with social media, and also, because I know your advocacy for younger women, and kind of the detriment of the likes of Instagram and social media in these times for young women?
Yeah, yeah, that's a big juicy one that's very
That's a
up
juicy one.
for all of us and definitely
I
up
know
for
it
me.
is. Yeah,
Yeah. I think in that like humble, the ushering in and the initiation for me into womanhood was the responsibility of what womanhood and the feminine is, at least for me. And
yeah,
aspects of that are the real cultivation and the real sharing of feminine principles, such as the continuity like of life and bringing people together and nourishing and creating
yeah.
life, community, care for each other. Like, it's like the opposite of competition. It's really like the coming together and the humble listening and depth, and all these different pieces. And so I think
Mm,
in that initiation, and that there was this next responsibility where it's like I um the motivational mechanism of where I was coming from was not adolescent anymore, where it's like, and I think a
yes,
lot of social media, not all of it, but most of it, is has a narcissistic tendency, has like
yeah,
a attention seeking. Like it really plays on the strings, not only like the hormonal strings of, say, dopamine, um, instead of oxytocin, that is truly something that like bonds us, but there's something
yes.
superficial and surfacey about it that doesn't um, work in tandem with those principles of true community, of communion, of care, of the creation, in a sense of what the feminine is and like what a
Mm,
woman is.
mhm.
And so I've had to really spend the last 2-3 years deeply deprogramming myself, and in the deprogramming, what is, I'm still in a very emergent process, like as a woman, but this
Yeah.
other thing is emerging, and it feels like it has, you had, I don't know what word you use, but that like ferocity of my like maidenhood, or that
Yes.
like dynamism that I had. I still have that, but it's now directed in a way that's much more like holistically of service, and might
Mm,
not be as outwardly seen. It's not just like for other people to like or
yes.
something. It's like it's for truly the greater good.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true integration and maturity, maturing of your inner process, I suppose,
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Um, which is huge. I mean, I know because I'm on a different, a little bit of a forward stage from you, where I'm kind of hitting on I'm the womanhood
Cusp.
into cusp into the early baby crone stages in the next,
Yeah.
10 years. And so it brings up so much as a woman, in how you meet the kind of the death of the other archetypes
Hmm.
of self, or the maturation of those
Yeah.
archetypes, or the shifting of them into something entirely different, right?
Yes.
And that's, I love this about you, because you're such a great carer for people in terms of nourishing their gifts, and the archetypes that they play out. I mean, what would you say your dominant archetype right now is, or that you're working with right now in your life, do you feel?
um I That's a good question. I don't know how to like pose it in like I don't have the framework of like,
Yeah.
saying some kind of like archetypal goddess or something or
No,
some,
no. Well, you
but
are
it would be
Bridget.
cool if I
You are the
had that.
goddess. Bridget.
Okay, fine. I'll use Bridget. So what I'm doing lately is I'm very much so like pulling out like like a sort of like of truth, and it's a dance because we all have the masculine and feminine within us, but there's this like real discernment within myself, and then within like the world that I'm like cutting through and like really like piercingly getting precise with. And then also from the feminine side being like, oh my God, what needs nurturing and like what needs like support and life. And so you
Yeah.
spoke to like the younger kids and the teens and like that phase of life. And I'm like, oh my God, like they need a lot of help right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that to answer your other question, one of the things that social media begets is perpetual maidens and perpetual boys and girls, where it's like
Thank you.
that is not modeling these ushering in of these different initiatory stages and development and celebrating that development that is like critically necessary for the continuity of like humanity and culture. And so I'm
Yeah.
seeing that, and now that I'm not like in my own kind of like ego trip about needing my own attention, and I can be like, it's about more than me, which is
Yeah.
like a phase of motherhood or woman. Then I can be like, where is help needed? And then I'm building capacity so that I can help. And so I'm seeing that category as being something that needs a lot of assistance right now.
Huge, huge. Thank you for bringing that piece in, because I've often personally felt so powerless in terms of how do I help bring service to younger and younger generations who are just bombarded
Mhm.
bombarded with everything,
Yeah.
everything. And something that you've spoken to recently, actually, in your own podcast, is around, that the emergent process of the spiritual path, right? And say these young adults, these young um souls that are open and exposed to all of these concepts now that we wouldn't have been. We would have had to dig for things. It would have been a totally different consciousness that was supporting us. And
Yeah.
so how can we support these younger ones, knowing that they have their own path as well of figuring out a whole new layer of consciousness here. Um, but yeah, I feel like you do that in your work. I know that you have a lot of younger souls that are attracted to you, that listen to you, which is phenomenal. It's great, Bridget. I really see you as a role model
Thank you.
in that capacity, and it's so needed. So yeah, I mean, is there something specific that you would see yourself creating, or that, how would you see or envision helping in service to that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things because I have this part of me that like visions from like the higher spiritual space and then absolutely executes in the physical reality. And that like
Yes.
conduit is like very in place. And so I'm having to actually hold the reins a bit because I'm like, well, like I can do this like online program, but then these kids, these teens or whatever, need to be in person with each other,
Yes.
because that's the essential part of like the medicine that's needed. And like so there's a lot crafting, but like it's like whoa, like hold on, like I need to fully, and it's never like a fully processed thing, but I need to
Yeah.
like move through all of what is needed to the degree to be able to be of assistance. So it's like, I mean, I think this time last year I was already going to co-create like a young like coming of age initiation. So like putting together really
Yes.
initiation gateways, ideally in person, but for those that can't do that, like online. And I was about to like do that with my other girlfriend a year ago. And it's just like, yeah, right. Like there was so
Yeah.
much to come into alignment. So I think the first way
Mhm.
for me to help is to come into alignment as much as I can to be a role model, And like if I can
Yes.
actually be a role model, oh my God, like you know, like for us and for anyone else, it's like, what greater gift is that than like for someone
Yes.
to model, you know, us in some way, or like take, you know, receive some kind of like wisdom or help, and then have goodness come from that. And like
Mm,
so much of what I'm seeing modeled brings nothing but like sadness and destruction and, you know, like non-fulfillment. And so
yeah.
yeah, it's a big redirect, you know, like for
Mm,
myself personally and then culturally. And there's not a lot of reinforcement again in that like attention realm, but there's a lot of
yes.
reinforcement and support from source, from nature, from life. Like everything's like, will you please like orient like and balance all of these things that are, you know, needed in the world to sustain like humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really beautifully spoken to, because it is that. It is, eh, you are you are in service in that way, just by being your own trailblazer and really being the model that you looked for. Uh, and and I suppose me too, that we are still looking for. We have to
Yeah.
create that for ourselves. Really, in these times, I feel. And also, I think, speaking to those, uh, uh, there's so much going on, right? And something I wanted to talk to you about, if you don't mind, is something that you touched upon in your video around, going too fast and doing too many things, too many of the things, and especially in the um, psychotropic
Mm-hmm.
realm of all the plant medicines, which is at epidemic levels here, in even in
Is
Ireland.
it?
Yeah, and it's just everywhere. It is
Yeah.
everywhere. And the lack of proper containers, the lack of after support, psychedelic
Mm-hmm.
integration support, all of that. And how these younger ones who are already tapped in, right?
Yeah.
And yet it's the absolute overdosing of methods, of spiritual experiences, all of those different things that will, as you spoke to, I think as well, splinter people off and really create beings who are not able to function here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah. Sorry, that's a big mouthful, but I have a bee in my bonnet about it. So I'd love to hear anything that you want to just share about that. I know that you've spoken about it recently, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, good. Keep that be alive. Like, you know what
yeah,
I mean? Like it's some of those things where it's just like, you know, stop talking about that. And it's like, no, I'm not gonna stop talking about it. Like
yeah,
these things need to be talked about. And I look up to role models like that of people that keep talking about these things that need to be talked about. Because
yeah,
they're helping, you know, like the say in his own right, like Jordan Petersons of the world, or certain things that's like certain things need to be said and continue to be said. So thanks for continuing to
right,
say it.
sure,
Um, so as far as that, I mean, you know, it's like there's from the perspective of my one of my mentors, Dan Winter, like it's like the bliss experiences are needed. Like the transcendent, we need transcendent
yeah,
experiences. It's our like birthright to be in those communion experiences. And so that's fair. Like, and that's needed, and that's like a really healthy thing. But when it becomes like a coping mechanism to actually numb, which is what it's
yeah,
doing, like, or bypass the real like work or the real pain or the real sadness, or to like almost torture ourselves with too much of that, you know, because
mm,
that could actually it can be like a lot actually in those experiences, and to like bring up that pain like so intensely. We're just not designed for that, as I've dove pretty deep into like somatic, you know, different therapeutic like work. And
yes,
so it's one of those things that, you know, in these different traditions, it depends on which ones. Like for instance, Datura, which was an initiatory adolescent psychedelic. Well, it's not even a
that's
psychedelic.
right,
It's a delirium. But no one tried this, by the way.
yes,
No one tried this. But it was just used once at puberty in West Africa for girls and in Southern California for Native boys.
right,
Like it was used once, you know? And so I think that some of these things, it's like important to note that it's like, it was, and it had a purpose,
Yeah.
right? It was like to transition us like into into initiation, had like really good intention. And then, you know, some of the schools in South America and stuff, they were doing it all the time, and the kids started doing it young and stuff too. But again, with containers, like you're saying, with intention, and
Yeah.
a lot of us that are doing it, we're not built that way. Like I'm not built to like have daily ayahuasca. I'm like a sensitive little white Celtic chick. You know what I mean? And so we're just not designed that way. And I appreciate that there's that Terence McKenna quote saying something like, you know, for the empaths,
Mm,
that's actually one of the worst things that you could do as an empath, is to go down the psychedelic path, because you're so sensitive. It's for the people that are kind of like so begrudgingly in their ways that they need to like break something.
yes.
And again, is breaking it the way, like it's such like a yang, like the core origin has like this like yang like breakthrough energy, or this coping energy, or this bliss seeking energy. And I
Mm,
think that the key is like those things aren't bad. Like none of them are bad. Like psychedelics are incredible. I mean, you and I are plant lovers. Like we
absolutely.
love our plant allies more than anyone.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And
but
I've done the plant spi I've
yeah,
worked with the plant spirits, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, but
So they're still great allies, and it's just one of those things that it's like we have to do the deeper work
mm,
sober.
mhm, yes.
We have to do, that's like a,
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of it as a tree, it's like that's like a, you know, once a year cake, like slice of cake, you know.
Yes.
The meat of it, the meat of what is needed like for the soul process is the deep slow work, and it needs to be done slow so it doesn't
Yes.
trigger trauma responses or freeze things even more. And
Mm,
so I think really thinking of him that way. And I like how my brother, actually, he's a big psychonaut. He's like a psychonaut for sure. But he's very studied in the way that he does it. He does it, you know, from the like scientific angle, where he studies like the brain chemistry and like how long it takes to come back, you know, before you can actually, you know, use up all of your serotonin or use up all of the hormones on your next trip. And
oh,
so I'll say, so like, what's your next journey? And he's like, well, I can't do it for 3 months. And I was like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, I need to recover I need to recover and rebalance everything. So from the
good for him.
biological standpoint, and then from the, you know, like psychosomatic standpoint, like it does take integration. It does take
Mm,
time. And I've had my most profound, you know, spiritual experiences doing it sober in a very gentle way. And
yes.
so
Yes.
it's seemingly harder, but it's not. And it's like fulfilling in a different way. So, yeah, I'm just encouraging of that for rare days.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm your sister on that. I've always had that connection. Well, it's come through in my 20s and in my 30s, that connection with spirit through, well, through nature as the gateway,
Yeah.
always, and the minerals, the stones and the crystals. But also have been very called to the plant medicines to experience what other people were experiencing, but always knowing that I was never to do it really at
Yeah.
all. Just
Yes.
to sit with one of the plant teachers once, and that was enough. That was
Yeah.
enough, you know. And that one sitting has taken me years to integrate. Years.
Yes.
So when I
Yeah.
hear about people doing ceremonies every month, every couple of weeks, you know, in places where the actual medicine does not grow, it's not indigenous to here.
Hmm.
I just think you're opening yourself up to so many energies that you just, for young people especially, how to mitigate all of that is a big one. So yeah, just putting the
Yeah.
extra word of caution in there, because it's so, yeah. Even the slice of cake, I don't know. It's not for everybody. It's
No.
really not for everybody.
No, it isn't. And especially those, you know, these young ones coming in, you know, which now are saying their mid 20s or teens or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, golly, you got like their souls like are so much more like, you know, available to all of this and so much more
Yes.
sensitive and like all of those things. And so yeah, yeah, it's an
Yeah.
interesting conversation.
Well, I suppose so that's where it's coming back to really simplifying the spiritual path. So whatever the spiritual path, inverted commas, whatever that is, it's just your embodiment, your connection with your spirit. And I suppose you have to go through certain gateways to really start to understand yourself. And sometimes maybe you do need to blow it out of the water, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, but I think the more of us that are holding that space of integration and doing the deep work. So
Hmm.
I'd love you to just speak to the things that have really helped you along the path, because I know when I met you, family constellation was huge. That deep ancestral work was
Yeah.
so powerful and continues to be. So yeah, I mean, if you'd
Yeah.
like to give a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Um, they, well, I just want to speak to one last thing on that
Yeah,
other
please.
subject, which is being aware of the cultural normalization, like where, especially around like the plant medicines or around any of these things that
Yes.
then seep into the spiritual conversation where it's like, yeah, I mean, it's fine to smoke weed all day, every day. It's fine to like do this, and be like open sexually or this or that. And so there's just a
Mm,
lot of normalization. And I think one of the ways to keep that in check is to find role models that you watch over time that like it's like, where does that
yeah.
path lead? Like I was just talking to my partner last night or the night before, and he was having a conversation with his friend around like all the original hippies that were doing all the LSD that were really free. And
Yes.
they were like, did much come out of that? Like, like
Yes.
what
Great
really
question.
actually came out of that? And to be really honest with that. And so it's like those people that are doing badass things, like making massive changes in themselves for the world, like that the energy is like clean and good, like looking to them and being like, what are they doing? Like, and are they doing this like all the time? And there's
Yeah.
phases for everything. So we have to like acknowledge that. But I think watching that, and then I always like with the keeping it in check, I always like to think of like the grandmother or the grandfather, like the tribal like elder or like the grandma that's like so like psychic and badass. That's like, what are you doing? Like like what would the like wise woman like crone like using
Yes.
that? Like what
Yes.
would she say? Like often our parents modeled not so good stuff either, so we can't even like be like, what would your dad say or what would your mom say? It's like, what would like the elder grandma like coming down from like the heavens like say about that? Like
Yes.
what does she feel? And I think that which I guess people could misinterpret and be like, Father Sky is so excited for me
I
to
know.
do this, I get out. But you know what I mean? Like where we have to kind of keep ourselves in check. And it's, exploration is good, and it can definitely go too far.
Mm,
And so I think it's just really important to stay balance is just always going to be the key.
thank you. Yeah. 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 That's it. It's accountability and having that pullback of check in, check in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Check in.
so important and such a valid point when you start thinking about the movements of where all of the original hippies and what came through was a lot of fragmentation. And
Yeah.
yes, the birth of new things and new
Yes.
ways and openness. There was an opening for sure, but we're in one of those cycles again, right?
Hmm.
And so yeah, it's can we do it better this time? Can we improve
Yeah.
on that consciousness opening of that time and build
Yeah.
on it?
And they're teachers. Like it's like,
Oh
the
yeah,
plants are teaching, and can we have some like structure and like, longevity thinking and perspective in tandem with, all of these things, not just thinking about this weekend.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and there's so much around that, but we'll transition, and so beautifully spoken to. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So the question was around what tools have helped me on my, or what was the
Yes.
question?
Well, because I've dived into, you really helped me back in the day with some family constellation work
Oh, yeah, yeah,
that I
yeah.
did with you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I've seen your progression then, how that's really helped your own constellation, and then
Yeah.
what you evolved through, what other practices have helped. Um,
Yeah. The
yeah,
tried and true ones
yeah,
that kind
yeah,
of like, yeah, continue to work and such.
exactly.
Um, I mean, I was doing it this morning. I've been doing it the past few days. Like the ancestral work, I cannot say enough about. I mean, and that
Yeah.
was the first work, as you're saying, I was introduced to in my early 20s, which is family constellation work. But like the ancestral stuff is our main stuff, you know? And
Yeah,
I
it
I
is.
mean, you know, you're sitting over
Oh
there in
yeah.
Ireland, for
Oh,
heaven's sake.
stop. I know. It is the work. It is the work. Yep.
It's the work, you know, and it's like it ain't pretty. It ain't
No.
pretty. There's definitely treasures in it, but it's like, you know, like I go through these, and these things come through in waves, like only as much as like we can handle at once, but
Mhm.
it's just, if we can actually like really work at it, it can change everything. It can change ourselves in the world. So anyways, the
Yeah.
ancestral work through family constellation, through even just somatic experiencing, um, going back and investigating and like really taking in the stories of what happened with your ancestors, all of
Mm,
those pieces are just radically powerful.
yeah.
Um, and so I think the ancestral work and those tools around that are just really profound. Um, and then I mean, somatic therapy, like where we're really like feeling
Feeling.
feeling like into
Yep.
our bodies, and that is in tandem with soul retrieval. But like somatic therapy, soul
Yes.
retrieval, I mean, again, like that was one of the first things through soul retrieval I was introduced to in my early 20s, and I haven't, like I got trained in all these things, and so
That's
I'm
right.
doing the self processing,
Yes.
and it doesn't stop. I use the tools every day. Like it might just be like for a moment that I'm using like a tool or an experience,
Mm,
but I mean, it continues. You know, I've had like clients or friends that, you know, say have done their 30 ayahuasca journeys and never even touched on this thing that can happen in this moment of like gentle witnessing of their feelings and their internal state.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot. So those I think are kind of like the two big ones. And it's not necessarily a modality, but I'm just gonna make it a modality in a sense, is that like truly living close to nature.
Mhm.
Like I just can't say enough of how important that is as an ally, support, teacher, like that communion to reconnect us with our own true nature.
Yes.
So I think that those, of anything, are like the biggest three tools, and like that just I return to and utilize every time. Like it's like the really whittled down, like, you know, knife in
Yes.
the toolkit. It's like, okay, we go to that a lot. Like there's other ones. It's like meditation, breathing. You know, like and I'm like, no, no, no. These other ones are like real, you know, real world
Yes.
tools, and also real, you know, when you're in like the high ethers and when you're in your real life, those ones continue to come around.
That's so true. And the subtlety of it, when it becomes a part of you, it becomes a natural extension of you, right? When you've engaged your ancestral lineages in that way, there's such a dynamic relationship that has encoded, I suppose,
Yeah.
and you're in constant dialogue,
Yeah.
but subtler and subtler as you move through things, I feel.
Yes. And then and it's just really like it's the dialogue and the connection, and then just like the discernment and the cleaning out, you know, where it's like,
Yes.
you know, so much of these patterns that give us all this trouble and these things that we repeat, you know, they're from that. Like but, I mean,
Yeah.
all the big teachers say it, it's like over 50%, if not more, like 8 up to 80%. It's coming from your parents and your ancestors, and so the more that we can, like, see what is theirs and then take what is ours and receive the gifts and clean out the mess as to not, repeat the patterns, and we just
Yeah.
keep repeating them. I just saw it last night. We were doing the ancestry of my partners, and
Right.
his ancestor before they left Ireland was married to Bridget. And
Stop.
yeah, and, like, left Ireland, and, like, it's just I'm like, "Are we," and there were some other crazy synchronicities even about Texas, and we're like, "Are we just repeating, like, our family's
Oh
patterns?" And
my
it's like,
God.
"Yeah, absolutely we are," until we realize it and we mend whatever that, break is, or
Mm,
sometimes it's, like, a really good thing and we just keep on returning to it or that place or those people and
yes.
that energies because it works. So there's
Yeah.
both happening.
That's why it's so complex, and there's no quick fix
Yeah.
when you're resolving these patterns and dynamics. There's always another layer and another little component, which is I love how travel though, and the different landscapes, and then the lineage places, and how they shift something in you every time you meet those physical places, right? Which
Absolutely.
you've done a lot of that travel yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, the traveling is like a great integrator and balancer, I think, to all
Yeah.
of that. And I think a lot of people, like, because you're like, there's another layer. Like, I think a lot of people get freaked out about that. They can either like hang their hat on it and be like, there's just endless layers, and then you just kind of like stay in this weird, constant healing process, which is like really annoying when me or anyone else is doing that. And
Yes.
then, right, where it's just you're like, just hand me more. So there's like these like weird layers. But then there's absolute truth to it. And it's like, how far do you take it? Like it with the family constellation, some of the people, I was in it for 2 years,
Mm.
like once a week. And then my dad went back like a year or two later, and the same people were kind of like, digging up the same stuff like again and again. And it's like, well, how long do you do this? And like, when do you step away? And it's like, there's an end to that layer, an end to that cycle. And then you
Yeah.
kind of like put it away, book on the shelf. And then, like a couple years later, it might resurface with another layer. But I have found it to be true that it is pretty much endless and infinite layers, but they get like, you get better at it. And
Yes.
it's
Yes.
right. Have you noticed
Yeah.
that you get better at it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. At all of it. Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think that also speaks to that there's the addiction to, or over reliance maybe on certain modalities or certain spiritual practices, right? That keep us in that loop of,
Yes.
there's more, and we keep circling and circling with just old energy. And
Yeah.
maybe it's just time to 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 break that completely and do something different,
Yeah.
you know.
And when it needs to resurface, it will. And like
Yeah,
it'll become obvious.
of
And
course.
then, but you don't need to, yeah, like sit in it forever because then that's not good either. And I think that that's the balance of like being in the spirit world and like doing the personal work and then like living life and enjoying it.
That's
And
it.
like the ebb and flow
Yeah,
between those two.
that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's living your life really,
Yeah.
and finding that equilibrium, finding that middle path
Yeah.
to through it all.
Yes.
If you can, it's not always easy,
No.
especially when you're caught in something. But yeah, so I love that, and I mean, I love the depth also of what you bring with kind of how you catalyze people in your life, the groups that you bring together. And I know that you've been helping a lot of people over the years, so thank you for that, for all that you bring on that. And yeah, like speaking to the retreats in Sedona and Hawaii and places like that, like I would see those places as, yes, could be ancestral on, and
Hmm.
are ancestral for some people on that level, but they're more like massive planetary
Hmm.
catalyzers, aren't they? So
Yeah.
you touch into a physical space like that on retreat, Hawaii or Sedona, and that opens up a whole other side of people, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Because like, that's what starts to happen once you, like, move through the ancestral, then it, like, becomes, like, oneness, humanity, culture, and then
Yes.
cosmic and galactic, and that's why it is endless, is because then it, like, is just, like, one of the pathways to oneness. But
So
yeah, it just opens all kinds of, um, energies, I think, that are just kind of nicely contrasted, maybe actually to our normal, uh ancestral energies, or like our
yes.
native energy in a sense, and it's like it's so different. It's kind of like I like taking a psychedelic that's not from your culture. You're like, whoa, okay, like this is a whole state shift. It's like it's
Yeah.
like that, but also designed in a way to then help see things from another vantage, or
Mm,
experience yourself in another energy, so that then you can approach that thing that is so kind of seemingly innate you, and shift that pattern or whatever it is. So I
yes.
think that those are really nice, like contrast spaces that catalyze, that have a purpose of catalyzing people.
Oh, they do. For sure they do. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just musing today on, the travel that I've done and the places that I've gone to kind of almost run away from myself, right? And the
Yes.
total irony is that you truly meet yourself when you come right back to the start and come back to your roots, right?
Yeah.
And and not saying that going to these places and these sacred sites are not very useful, amazing activators. But really it all begins back back here and back where you started, really. Um, you know,
Yeah. Definitely. And
which
those
is
those places can be, I think, soul places too. Where it's like
mm,
we have like other like lifetimes, and so then it like inspires and like reinvigorates our zest to
it
go do
does.
the inner work, at
Oh
home.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Um,
Totally. They charge you up.
but you're right, the
Yeah.
epicenter of home is the place. Like, it's like, I'm not sure what's next on my path.
Yeah.
Like, who was it that was talking about that? There was like some spiritual teacher. Oh, it was one of my teachers, Mark Woolen, was like had all these like issues and challenges or whatever. And then it like came down to like going home with his mom was where
I know.
was where it all was. And it's like, yeah, that's where it is.
That's exactly it.
Right there.
Yeah, and it's so simple, and it's so mundane that
Yes.
we can it's almost so mundane that it can't be coped with. It's like, get me any other kind of transcendent
Yes.
experience other
Yes.
than sitting in a room with this person that I'm trying to, like, not be like or get away from or whatever.
And ironically, that's the pathway to the transcendent experience. If you can meet that threshold with
Yeah.
mama,
Yeah.
or with your homeland, or with whatever it is, that is an initiatory threshold. And on the other side is treasure,
Oh,
and is that thing that the like experience you're seeking through the coping mechanism, the actual like truth of that experience is on the other side.
you take a
And
breath into that.
I'm speaking from heavy experience. I
Oh,
mean, it
I hear you.
just doesn't get much heavier over here, actually, so it's
Oh my
nice.
gosh. Oh gosh.
I've
Oh yeah.
unearthed stuff, like, in the past few days that I'm
Have
like,
you?
"Oh, yeah," like, days. I was trying to figure out if my family was in the potato famine, or if they left before, and I was, like, trying to figure that out, and then it led me on this
Oh.
whole other tangent back to Salt Lake City, and, like, my ancestors were crepes,
Oh
you know?
gosh.
And so
Oh,
it's
bless
great
them.
to. Absolutely. And so it's like, how can I alchemize that, like, for good? How can I learn from that and carry on in a good way?
Well, you're doing it. We're all doing it by bringing that awareness in.
Yeah.
By even opening that door.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. I love that, yeah, as you're preparing and it's some months away, but yet the energy is already rising to meet you of this land of Ireland. And yeah, I suppose that's the nature of sacred travel, that really it catalyzes the work. it
Mm.
really does open those thresholds and gateways into parts of your ancestry and parts of you that haven't been looked at before, perhaps.
That's such a good point. Yeah, it's
You
so
know?
true. It's like so that we're prepared for these places, and for whatever that initiation is. It's like
Yes.
prep work, prerequisite work,
Yes. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's so important, isn't it? That when
Yes.
you are undergoing a sacred pilgrimage and
Hmm.
that you really become dialed in with your intention, with, you know, all the components that are, or your reason for your why for going to that place. You
Yes.
really become conscious and attuned to that. Um,
Yeah.
rather than just going, yeah, I mean, you can do the unconscious journey, right? I'm sure I've done them.
Yeah.
You've done
Yeah,
them.
I've done them for sure. And it's
Yeah.
like, making the most of it. I mean, the amount of like time, resources, energy, it takes to
Yeah.
go like do something. It's like, gosh, let's like really prepare for like this journey. At least
Yeah.
that's how I think about it now, because I'm not just like 25 again where I'm just like, I'm gonna go everywhere
I
all the
know.
time. And it's like I'm this is my one main trip this year. And so let's
Yeah,
like, make the most of this.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. That's the changing and the maturation again and the moving through different cycles, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that the thresholds of initiation I feel are I love that you spoke to that. It's so important. And it's also I feel like there's so many different types of initiations,
Yeah.
right? And how do we how do we ultimately support ourselves in moving through an initiation? Like to do it alone is very masterful. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's even more masterful if you can do it in with others who love you and see you and with true community. You know that
Abso
that's the way.
absolutely. One of the cultures that I work with in South America, because we need some
Yes.
contrast to like help us with our own past and ancestors. There's like a principle called the Tani, and it's this overarching energy that actually is like a probably an archangel or some kind of energy like that. And it's the ceremonial energy that's behind all initiation. And there's these big initiations in life, birth, death, like
Yeah.
matrimony and childbearing, and there's these like main ones, and then there's all these intermediary ones, and there's an overlighting spiritual energy behind that. And so I think that
Yes.
that's kind of like nice to like feel and know, like you're saying, like we're not doing it alone, where you just like
Mm,
even going and taking a plant medicine by yourself, you're not alone. Like you've got the plant, you've got the
absolutely.
ancestors of that place, you've got, like you're not. So I think that is definitely a piece of wisdom that continues to come in, as we're in the woman and crone phases where it's like it's very naive to think you can do it alone or that you need to or that that's like the
Yes.
path. And so it's like how do we create connection yeah for those gateways to usher that in like in a good way that's kind.
Yes. Yeah. And you do have to create it yourself. You have to build that community and those people around you if it's not there, right?
Yeah, yep, you got to go find it,
Yeah,
in
you do.
whatever way it is. Even
You
if
do.
it's online, like there's not community where I am right now, but I'm sure as heck creating something,
Yeah,
like, like
you
around
are.
me. If
Yeah.
it's with the oak trees outside or like with, my
Yes.
mentor, with you, with friends, like it's like,
Yeah,
yep, I'm making sure that's happening.
absolutely. Priority, high priority.
Yes.
Oh, I love that, Bridget.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's so many things I could be talking about with you. I think we'll let's round it out with maybe a little bit about because we work a lot together with the elemental energies.
Yeah.
Um, and really, I suppose, yeah, your main teachers. Is there anything that you'd like to share around elementals? Is there an experience that was really fun for you, or that was really enlightening, um, surrounding elemental beings, or anything like that that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I think that some of my oh gosh, yeah, this is fun. Again, they open doors. I'm like, whoa, I forgot about all these experiences. Um, they connect with me in a lot of different ways. I think some of them that have been I've found, because like all elemental energies are just incredible. But I think water for me is like one of the primary ones that like I resonate with, a lot and can like speak to, commune with a lot. Um, and I've had a lot of ecstatic, you know, experiences like being in different water energies
Mm.
and realizing too, again, this correlation of the elemental energies, like we have all the elementals in us, like we are nature, we are the earth, like the water in me and all the different kinds of water in me is out there. And so it's again
Mm.
this like remembrance of like when we're engaging with these pieces of water, it's like a soul retrieval, we remember these parts of like these aspects of water like within us,
Yeah.
and whether it's the specific experience that came back of this waterfall in Hawaii, and I straight up went into like an ecstatic like hysteria, and that led to kind of like this whole like DMT journey like the rest of the day, because like the water was so like bright and high and it was just so incredible. And then, in contrast, that was like a waterfall and a river. I was just in the cenotes in Mexico in December, and like getting into, I think we visited maybe 8 different cenotes, which
Ooh.
is like it's an underground aquifer that's exposed. Some of it's exposed to the sky, some of it's in
Right.
caves, but it's one aquifer, but there are different like expressions. And as
Ooh.
I was getting into all of them, they're all so different. Like some of them are like dark. I'm like, very, Morgan, like shadow,
Ooh.
amazing energy. And then some of them are just like so high. And as I was getting into all these different like pools, cenotes around the area, it was like all of these are just like different expressions of like women, of like woman, like where it's like
Love
each one of
that.
them is exquisitely beautiful, but so different, like so different and so needed,
Mm.
and I think that like rounds back out to like the
Mm.
competition energy, of kind of social media and like just the divisionary isolation of like the world, where it's like, oh God, no, like all the expressions of like woman in its own way is needed. And I think that's so
Yeah.
much of that's an example of like how elemental energy just like teaches me and informs me of like how I can be a better person and woman.
Mm. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, the body of the earth and all of her undulations and watery spaces, all of it. Yeah, that's such a beautiful point. It
Yeah.
really is. And I can feel the different watery spaces of woman that you're talking about as you brought me on that journey. Wow. Because you're right into the cave you're into the earth and into the deep waters, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you with the elementals? Like, what are some like highlight ways that they speak with you?
Gosh, again, the water for sure. Water spaces have always, the beach, like really traveling through with rocks and the liminal space of a shoreline and a
Mm,
wave, and
mm,
how you how you dance with that, and I mean literally dance. I've had that space where it activates something in me where I'm just in that movement and flow
yeah.
with with the worlds, really.
Wow. Wow.
So there is an induction almost, I feel, um, into those spaces and into the other world through the elemental forces like that
Yeah.
for me. And not always, obviously, but yeah, I think the water spaces really do that. They lull you into that space. Yeah.
And isn't that just like such a prime example that like you as like your own expression of woman like are experiencing it on the shorelines. And I've been on a
Yes.
lot of shorelines. I've not experienced that, you know? I did mushroom on a shoreline and didn't experience that, like, so
Right.
there's something, like, to where, like, that's how you key in and your signature,
Yes.
like, moves through, and then it's like mine moves through in a different way, and then that's how we are as, like, individual souls, like, with each other.
True.
It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. It's our elemental selves embodying
yeah,
through our physicality and our human self. Yeah.
totally.
I do see you actually as because you're such a mountain spirit, aren't
Yeah.
you? You're like so like, oh, just you're like the mountain goat crawling up rocks. Like, yeah, I think you had a lifetime as a giant. I see you as a giant. Like I do.
I thought you were gonna say you had a lifetime as a mountain goat. I was gonna be like,
You might have
"Okay.
too.
All right. Okay, I'll take
I'll
that in."
go with this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting energy, and, like, even here in Texas, it's like, okay, there's alligators in all the water spaces and poisonous
Wow.
snakes, and so it's like, "Hmm, how do I do this?" It's, like, my favorite elemental energy to connect with, but, like, it's like a new threshold. It's
It
like, well,
is.
part of the woman's body is, like, full of alligators and snakes. So it's like, okay, this is an interesting one. So it's like, how do we play with all these, and then honor the ones that, have been desecrated or are now toxic in the middle of cities, so it's like,
Yes.
there's a lot to explore, as we engage with the elemental energies.
Oh gosh, yeah. You were involved with a process, weren't you, in the Verde Valley
Yeah.
with preserving? Is that still ongoing, or
Oh, yeah.
what's happening with
Yeah.
that?
Our group did procure and preserve the Verde headwaters.
That's right.
I think it's 7 springs that make up the Verde headwaters, which is the last remaining longest running river in Arizona.
Oh
So
my gosh,
yeah, it's a spectacular like achievement. Yeah, what's going on there. So
that's phenomenal. But I know that place. That was my first point of contact when I first came to Arizona in 2010.
no,
Was
you
the
went there?
well, it was the Verde Valley. It was the river.
Yeah.
I was brought down in.
Really? To the
Yeah,
Verde?
yeah, yeah.
Thanks
And
for
I
doing the
really
pre-work.
oh god, I was
Come
not
on, I
conscious
totally
of
give you credit. I totally give you credit though. Oh
oh
my gosh.
god. But there's the ancient the energy down there. Oh my gosh, and the ancestral spirits,
Yeah, yeah.
the cave dwellings, the Sinagua people, that they were a race that just disappeared,
Yeah.
weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so rich. There's so much there. So I'm delighted. Is that something that is still you're actively seeking support for, or is
I
it
think it's
is it a,
always I think funding is always needed and nice, to
yeah,
continue then like our next initiation into that, which is actually to create a nature school for children. Like that's what the purpose of the land is wanting, because the
it's
springs are
fabulous.
the babies, it's the innocence,
Yes.
and so that's the next direction. But yeah, we're actively working with it right now. I'll be going there in April, and so yeah, it's just phenomenal. And it's like, and it's, even though it's like, oh, it's just one water space or something, it's like, gosh, it's one, like it's like one is, and even
My
just like your
gosh.
attention to it,
Yeah.
however long that ago that was, like that you were caring about it, like helped that come to pass.
Yeah. Right.
And so I just can't say enough of all of our own parts.
Thank you. That's yeah.
Yeah.
Why that's vital. Yeah, that every little bit of heart intention, physically, um, mentally, heart, whatever comes forth is exactly what's needed. That
Yeah.
yeah, and we can all do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 One thing that I want to interject is I want to be
Yes.
precise with my words. And I said
Yes.
that my ancestors are creeps or were creeps.
Okay. Come back to
And
that.
I'm going to specifically say that there were quite a few men in my line
Yeah.
that were not in integrity and used charisma for malevolence and genocide of the native peoples and possibly of fellow pioneers, and were in part the workings of desecration of the feminine in the land and in their women. And so that's one of the energies that I'm working with. But that
Wow.
doesn't mean that it's all of my ancestors, because I've got like incredible ancestors too. But
Yes.
that's like one of the poignant seeds that I'm in the process of alchemizing and purifying.
Wow. Just, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really, really powerful to speak to that, because we all have those types of ancestral energies in our closets.
Yes.
We all do.
We all do.
Yeah.
Like, we
And
all do.
they need breath, they need conscious awareness, and yeah, they need that light to really counterbalance all the harm that's been done. So thank you for doing the good work, Bridget. Yeah.
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 Thanks for listening. And it's just, I want to, and I'm obviously like learning all of these things, and precision with like words and what I'm saying is like a part of that. And I like, want to model accuracy in that way, because I have in human design, I have the pathway of shock. And so there's like, you know, I have to navigate how to like, it is good because it like cuts and then it like breaks open things like for people. So it has its purpose, but that doesn't
Yes.
mean that I can't use accuracy with like how I use that particular energy that comes through me.
Absolutely. And that's much more illuminating as well. It gives a lot more body to opening those shadow spaces in other people's ancestry.
Totally.
And they really need to be talked about legitimately and intelligently and heartfully, which is what you're doing. So
Yeah.
it's bringing that awareness through.
Yeah.
So thank you for your precision.
Yes.
That's so good. I'll take
Yeah.
that on board for myself as well.
Okay. Thanks.
Moving forward.
Yeah.
Bridget, thank you so much. I think we I think we've enough for
Yeah.
today. I think we've opened up a few different places, but just acknowledging the being that you are and all of the facets of deep work that you've done, and thank you. Thank you, and
Oh,
continue to do. So, an
thank
honor
you.
to talk to you today.
100% right back at you. Like, as you're saying this to me, I'm like, why are you saying this to me? Like, you're doing the exact same thing and need like
Receive
all
it,
the
receive
accolades.
it. Receive
Um,
it.
yes, yes.
Yes.
So thank
Yeah.
you for all the work that you're doing, seen and unseen,
Thank you. Thanks,
for
Bridget.
forever. Yeah.
Thanks everyone for listening to us. Bless you.
Bye.
Thank you.